Hello, I'm Babbel coming to you from Mosaic Work Studio with a video from a new series focused on product. Being involved in building digital products for more than 12 years, we at Mosaic Works are always looking for ways to improve the way digital products are built. Back in 2017, we've decided to learn more from other product people so that we've created the Product Leaders Gathering. Practitioners on product, business, and technology, passionate about building successful products, are sharing strategies and techniques for product design, development, and validation. One of the speakers, Bettina Shzu-Juraschek, shared her insights on how to recover from a hard pivot. Bettina shares why and how Babbel pivoted from launching a new product to delivering value through its current product, as well as lessons learned along the way. She sets out to answer questions such as a product manager, how do you decide what problems are the most important to solve from this seemingly blank slate? How might the team setup change, or how might the product development process change? What kind of new roles might there be needed? Thank you and enjoy the talk.
So thank you for your patience. I was wanting to present from the podium instead of the desk at the side. So I'm very happy to be here today. And I'm very happy that you are here today to listen to my talk about how to recover from a hard pivot. I am a product manager, and since August of last year, I am responsible for the learning part of the product at Babbel. My name is Bettina Shzu-Juraschek. If you want to give me comments or feedback, my Twitter handle is @Bettina. So, Buna, I hope I'm saying that right in Romanian. I work for Babbel. It's a language learning app. The core product teaches 14 languages and 8 display languages on Android, iOS, and web. And the 52,000 lessons we have are made by expert linguists who leverage the latest didactic research to tailor the language learning experience for the user's native tongue. So we are an edtech company based in Berlin, Germany. And the question I would like you to think about today is, what would the world look like if all companies were learning companies? Now, what do I mean by a learning company? I don't mean that all companies should become edtech companies like Babbel. What I mean is, what if all the companies we work at become organizations that are capable of learning? So what would the world look like if all companies were like that? For starters, companies would pay more close attention to mistakes. So if there are no mistakes, then there's no learning. If there are too many mistakes that are not new mistakes, then there's also no learning there. And if the company is not changing its mind on some important questions each year, then there's no learning there either, at least not where it matters. So if there are mistakes, there are also successes sometimes, right? And to make mistakes and to have success, companies must be taking some sort of action to get there. So I hope all of you have some experience also getting mistakes and successes. What do you call the actions that result in such successes or mistakes? So I call them experiments. I think experiments is a familiar word to many people here. We heard Jamie talking about experiments, also Alex talking about experiments. And basically, as product managers, we design experiments to validate new ideas or features. And they could be mistakes or successes. And either way, both successes and mistakes feed back into new experiments. So whatever we learn would go back into the next iteration. So one consequence of being a learning company is experimenting not just on the product, but also in the process of building products. I think here today we have learned a lot about experimenting on products, and what I would like to talk about is, what if product managers experimented not just on the product, but with people, the structure of the organization of people who build products, as well as the process of building products themselves. So as a product manager, I'm happy to share with you how we've been experimenting with product people, and process at Babbel after a hard pivot. So there's one caveat. Hindsight is 2020. So if some things seem obvious now, in the heat of the decisive moment when you're trying to figure out what's next, it's not. So I've cleaned things up and tried to put some perspective on it. But if you've ever really struggled with some hard decision, you know that it's sometimes hard to see. And I'm from the south of the US, and there's a saying there that says, you can't read the label when you're sitting inside the jar. And I just realized that sometimes I'm not speaking into the microphone. So if anybody in the audience can't hear me, especially in the back, please just raise your hand. So that way I remember to lift up the microphone. So thank you for your help. So when I started at Babbel in August of 2016, the product and engineering teams were in the middle of rewriting one of our core products. And we had a code name for this. It was called Neo. And even though engineering was spearheading this effort for the rewrite, so that way we could maintain the code base better, we were rewriting the current product anyway. So why don't we just improve the user flow a little bit at the same time? Oh, and while we're at it, why not optimize the contents of the lessons? And oh, since we just rebranded, why don't we just redesign the whole product anyways? So we were adding complexity to a project that was already complicated. So you can see these lightning marks. This is kind of a danger sign, right? And during my onboarding, I jumped right in and started working on how to release this product in 3 different ways. The first way was de-risking customers canceling after releasing it. Or the second way was to de-risk leads not buying subscriptions after we release a new product. And the third way was simply to say, hey, we're really confident in this, and we're just going to release it as a big bang, no de-risking. The problem, however, was that all 3 plans needed more time to get out there. So that would mean that our customers wouldn't see new lessons or features for a while. That's not good. And the edtech industry research shows that the best way to retain users is to add new content all the time. So again, that's not good. And meanwhile, our competitors were popping up, and they were continuously adding new features because they didn't have tech debt to pay back like we did. So in November, we started thinking about, well, was this the right direction? Is it really that important that we rewrite the product for better maintenance, but not releasing new features for customers? So actually, we decided to say goodbye to Neo because we wanted to be able to release customer-facing value at the same time as taking away technical debt. So just because we made a decision doesn't mean we know how to really make it happen. Because for a long time, this was kind of the main goal of everyone, right? So we wanted to avoid the law of the golden hammer. So this is something that many people have talked about, and Abraham Maslow is just one of them, and he says it is tempting if the only tool you have is a hammer to treat everything as if it were a nail. So just imagine if you had one tool and you would use it to maybe open a door. Maybe you would use it because instead of a fork to feed yourself lunch. So basically, we wanted to avoid treating everything like we did before, like how we got to Neo. So we started experimenting as a company to learn how can we move on from this. So next, I will share with you some experiments we conducted in how we built the product, how we chose what to build. The question was, how might we get rid of technical debt so that way we can maintain the code base better? That was the original question. And the hypothesis back then was the best way to get rid of technical debt is to completely rewrite all the lines of code from the ground up as a service-oriented architecture. So that was our experiment. We started rewriting the code base, but because everybody was so busy rewriting the code base, all the new features kind of also got added into this. Like, let's improve the user interface, let's add new features, and let's all do this very quickly. And that was a mistake. Rewriting the product by building this new architecture from scratch meant not serving our users. So what did we learn from that? we learned that what works for us is actually evolution of the technical platform and not revolution like we were thinking of doing the Big Bang. And that actually goes not just for the technical platform, but for our processes and organization structure and everything else. So that's actually the current second experiment that we are in right now. And I think it's actually working pretty well. So it's not like we threw everything away from Neo. We were able to use it as a base to evolve our technical code base. So once we decided to pivot from rewriting this new product completely, there was a new product question. So what do we do next for our classic product after the hard pivot? So we had this entire big wish list, and how do we prioritize those? So the hypothesis is that we start with one backlog, so that way we can prioritize all the improvements that have come in over time with all the main stakeholders at one moment. So the experiment that we did was to set up a quarterly prioritization process with one backlog for transparent communication as well as collaboration across teams. So that way people can see and agree on what we can do with a number of engineers we have in 3 months. So I would say that it was success-ish because we learned that we actually needed 3 backlogs since we had 3 product groups. We had learning, marketing, and the payment team. And what we also learned was that we simply did not have enough engineers to work on both rewriting the code base as well as deliver new features at the same time. So the learning is that it was a good start, but we need to shorten the cycle. Instead of doing 3 months, we need to be able to react much faster to the market and changing information in less than 3 months, as well as streamline the backlog collection process. So people, now imagine if you've been giving your 100% to a project and it was going to be the new big shiny thing, and then suddenly all your hard work was suddenly canceled. So how would you feel? So basically, one of the questions we had for the people was, well, how do you get the teams who worked on Neo to feel valuable and trust the leadership again? So the hypothesis is that people need to feel that their contributions are valued and to understand that the mistakes are the price to pay for experimenting and trying out new things. So we wanted people to understand that making mistakes is actually okay for everyone and that there are good reasons behind making those decisions at that time. So the experiment was just to celebrate small wins. So even if we don't do a big launch party or whatever, just to have a little celebration to recognize the work that was done and to explain the reasons behind changes and listen to and address concerns about it. I would say that this was pretty successful, but it still is a work in progress because it takes time and repetition to take effect. So I will show just a little slide, a picture from a celebration party. So, it was like not a big launch. It wasn't fancy. It was like 15 minutes out of our day where we had eclairs. That's me on the right, and on the left is our user researcher, Christian. So it was after we did a redesign where we redesigned the user interface, and with the eclairs, you could decorate it with the sprinkles as you wish. So you could like redesign the eclairs. So that was kind of like a small celebration to just recognize, hey, we did something small. So the first 3 experiments I told you about, they are pretty much done. And the next 3 experiments I will tell you about, we're still in the middle of experimenting. So one thing that we also were asking ourselves was, how might we strengthen engineering responsibility for technical delivery within the feature teams? The hypothesis we had was that we could empower the engineering people managers. So what we had before was we had line managers, but they didn't have technical responsibility. So the hypothesis was that if we empower the engineering line managers who already coach and develop engineers to also lead delivery, this will ensure that working software gets delivered to our customers in a timely manner. So our experiment was just to empower the engineering people managers to also lead technical delivery. And what this really means is giving them the responsibility and power to decide on software decisions. We also had to change our team structure to enable this. So previously we had cross-platform teams. So in one team, there would be web, Android, and iOS. And now we have basically made them platform-oriented, so that way the engineering managers could be embedded in the feature teams. Yeah. So how did that go? So we're still experimenting, and also growing line managers, growing people into delivery leads, that takes time and practice. So we will see how this goes. But you know, with experiments, whatever we learn, we will fold into the next experiment or hypothesis. So process. Yeah, so how do we work together as a feature team? You know, the hypothesis is that since Scrum works for so many organizations, it should work for us, right? So the experiment was to just try Scrum. But as I mentioned before, there's the law of the golden hammer, where if there's only one tool that you have, well, everything looks like a nail. So this was kind of something like that, right? Where we said, okay, well, Scrum seems to be the standard practice in the marketplace. Let's just try it. It was actually a mistake. Adapting textbook Scrum was too rigid for us. Adapting all the ceremonies seemed to be a waste of time, some of it. So after that, we said, well, every team can decide on their own style of working together. Let's go more autonomous and see what happens. You know, you can decide if you want Kanban, Scrum, maybe even waterfall. You choose as long as you deliver. Well, this didn't work out so well either. We ended up wanting to have the same agile framework for all the teams to facilitate cooperation across the engineering teams. And also, I mentioned that we needed more engineers. So it would be easier to onboard these new engineers into the teams if we had a set framework for all the teams, as well as to get an overview on progress and planning. So the third experiment is that we're still experimenting. We now want everybody to have the same agile framework, which meant just a foundation of having dailies, sprints, estimations, plannings, and demos. But then everything else from Scrum, this is like what I call a Scrum buffet. You take what works for you. So we will see how this is working. And then the last question was, how do we discover new ideas from all over the company? Because it's not just product managers who come up with ideas. Actually, everybody can have a good idea. So one of the hypotheses was that we wanted to empower all of our colleagues to contribute good ideas to the product, whether they're in customer service or they're in learning, like the didactical part of learning, even PR or wherever, right? So we have a current experiment. We introduced the role of an idea owner. This is a transitory role to cultivate new product ideas as a partner for the product manager to drive forward new product ideas. We're still experimenting, but some idea owners find the product development too much responsibility, so I think we will probably soon have a second hypothesis. Yeah, so to recap, I have shared 6 experiments in the way we develop products at Babbel, and it's in product, people, and process. So we've learned a lot about what works for us as a company, but we're still learning. We still have a lot to learn. And that's actually a good thing, because we're a learning company inside and out. And that's also how we can stay relevant to not just our customers externally, but also to each other as colleagues within the company. So take my learnings not on faith. I am quoting somebody, Tom Peters, experiment fearlessly, but I'm sure many people have said this. So find out for yourself what works for your company, your product, and I encourage you to test every hypothesis on product, people, and process fearlessly. So I end with, again, what would the world look like if product managers experimented with the people who build products, the process of building products, instead of just the product itself? So what would your world look like if where you worked was a learning organization? Feel free to come talk to me after, or maybe do a little marketplace. So thank you for your attention. You can give feedback. That would be great to help me improve my skills as a speaker as well as my content. And there's a feedback app and feedback form at the back of the room. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Fabian. And I was wondering, what are the key success factors that you're watching when you're experimenting? Because you're experimenting on people, and you say that some experiments were successful and some were not. But I was wondering, what were you watching or what were you quantifying when you're defining if an experiment is successful or not?
For the people part.
Yeah.
I think for the people part, it's hard to have any quantitative KPIs. For me, it's more about team happiness, which is something that, you know, you kind of lick your finger and put it out and kind of get a feel. So I think it's really just talking to people, right? Like if people are happy, you see it, and if people are not happy, you ask about why, then that's kind of how you gauge it. So I don't have numerical KPIs for that.
This was Bettina Shzu-Juraschek talk back at the first edition of the Product Leader Summit in 2017. We're coming back next week with another video on product. Until then, don't forget to think, design, and work smart.